Day 12 of our 21-day human rights education program online. The last of a long module 1 and the last formal class of this module. Friends, today we are on business and human rights. Very for the first time. But you have got the best in the country, and his CV will tell you. A close friend, Viraf Mehta from Delhi, is with us, and I want to thank him for having accepted this invitation. He could not come earlier when it was scheduled because of health, but he was willing to reschedule it, and therefore we have you today, and we are extremely happy, Viraf, you were able to make it. Viraf is a social anthropologist who has been working on corporate responsibility issues for nearly 3 decades, notably with pioneering companies and NGOs, including the Tata Steel and Partners in Change, Partners in Change being an NGO. Has served on the boards and committees of numerous industry, government, academia, and civil society organizations, including Bureau of Indian Standards, Global Compact Network India, South Asia Forum for Responsible Business, Charities Aid Foundation, and Corporate Responsibility Watch. Also continues to be a resource person on corporate responsibility issues for leading business schools and its adjunct faculty at the Institute of Corporate Affairs. Since 2007, Mehta has focused his attention and support to the business and human rights agenda, has served on the committees of select international organizations, including the Institute of Human Rights and Business and the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. More recently, in April 2016, my dear friends, he was a rapporteur at the first United Nations Asia Regional Conference on Business and Human Rights held at Doha. Mr. Mehta served as a member of the Guidelines Drafting Committee of the National Voluntary Guidelines for the Economic, Social, and Environmental Responsibilities of Business. He is a member of the 2-person committee that was tasked with the updating guidelines in 2018, as well as a member of the MCA committee tasked with updating the Business Responsibility Report framework in 2019-20. People might be going crazy with all these committee names. Huh? He's also a member of the MCA Advisory Committee on the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights, which is the in thing now, and he will definitely come to that. And last of all, just like Abhay Shukla, who was here, or Martin, or the one on aging, Matthew Cherian, who was here, he is also a member of the core group of the NHRC on business, environment, and human rights. Thank you, Viraf, for accepting this invitation, and over to you for the next 30 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible to you. Henri mentioned that there was a health issue. Just to assure you, nothing beyond the normal. I've had some back injuries as a result of my climbing and other research work in Ladakh, and it was playing up, and I hope to be back in the mountains in June. So thank you all very much for being here. Just by way of not further introduction, but just setting the boundaries of this 45 minutes we have together today. In the first instance, what we can treat this session as this morning is a sort of a policy brief or a policy update. And I've already offered Henri and all his colleagues that at the end of this entire training, if at any point in time you have the need for a further interaction or clarification on any of the issues that I will raise this morning, you're more than welcome to connect with me through the organizers, and I will be able to spend more time with you. Normally, for business and human rights, we cover courses that, if they are short courses, we take at least 6 modules of 2 hours each. to cover the basic content. And I've seen the program, and I recognize, I think, that this is the first session that you're having where the focus is not human rights in that sense, it's business and their impact on human rights. So I think that I'd like to begin by saying that some of these committees that Henri mentioned are the overarching paradigm or space that I work in presently. The practitioner work in the supply chain, in the community, affected people is a separate conversation that's beyond the scope of today's presentation. So what do I want to do this morning? I want to take you back to about 15 years ago, first of all, to set some context. Up till about 2005, whilst there was a movement globally as well as in India to discuss with companies, not their charitable works, not their philanthropic missions, but their core business impacts on rights holders, on stakeholders caused by their business. And by their business, we don't define as just the company, the legal company, but the entire value chain, certainly the supply chain of which that company is a part. So I think that we were well set on a route towards discussing core business issues, whether these are labor rights, impacts on communities, impacts on climate change, and so forth. In India, as you well know, part of this mission to discuss core issues was distracted by our interpretation of corporate social responsibility and 2% of profits being spent ostensibly for the welfare of communities. Nevertheless, I think that what was missing, ladies and gentlemen, before about 2010, if you're stepping back 5 years earlier, was that when we want to look at business and discuss core business issues, what is the lens that we are going to use to do this? Up till that time, the thesis was that if there was a human rights impact, adverse impact by business, they violated human rights and so forth, then all that we had recourse to was to go to the state, go to the government, and ask them to legislate, make new laws, punish guilty companies, approach our courts, approach tribunals, approach remedial grievance redressal mechanisms, which is all fine. But what about the notion that if I have an impact as a business upon you, there is an obligation, if not a duty, certainly a responsibility for me at a baseline to address those impacts? As simple as that. I have an impact as a business upon you, as a consumer, as a worker, as somebody in the community, as an investor. Isn't it my business then to address, to understand these impacts on human rights and to address them? Now, this is easier said than done. Two things had to happen. One was that the very United Nations that have been mentioned earlier by Henri, in 2006, the Secretary General at that time, Kofi Annan, actually appointed a Harvard professor, Professor John Ruggie, with whom I must say I've had the pleasure to engage directly in the early days of his mission and contribute to his mission and the development of today what is known as the UNGPs, United Nations Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights. Professor Ruggie took 6 years to discuss with business, discuss with states, discuss with civil society, with trade unions, with academia. And you can imagine that frequently the risk was that the debate was so polarized. The views of business on the one hand, not leadership business, but just some of the more conventional business, shall we say, and the aspirations of activists, who many of them are anti-business. To balance this on a global level and to come to some consensus was a massive task. I was responsible in 2009 for bringing Professor Ruggie to India for an Asia regional dialogue. So after 2009, the intent always was for us working in the policy space that how do we get India to attach itself to this agenda, implementing the UNGPs, developing the framework, and then implementing it domestically here. Now, this is in a scenario where many things that are made by the UN, made in the West, very difficult to simply bring it here in that form and release it, let us say, to a small, medium enterprise factory. Yes, the large companies will get it, but for 90% of our workforce that is small and medium enterprise, how do we transmit this message? In an atmosphere where business and human rights is, even till today, scarcely and very sketchily taught in any B school, any university in India. So young people are going to the private sector, senior people from the private sector are coming to training, and the issues are not being taught as they should. So people are highly unaware, business managers are highly unaware, their leadership is highly unaware, and will find it difficult to even name 10 rights of a child, beyond saying there should be no child labor in my supply chain. So under these circumstances, we drafted in 2010 and 11, India's first ever articulation of what the government expects of business. And these, as has been mentioned to you, had the very lengthy name of National Voluntary Guidelines, etc., etc., etc. Why are these guidelines important? Up till 2011, when they were released, every time there was a symposium, a summit, a workshop on corporate responsibility, everyone would choose to define it in their own way. What are the responsibilities of business? And every company would define it in their own way. This was chaotic. So I think it was right for the government of India to consult with stakeholders and come up with a set of guidelines that are deemed to be issues of the future beyond today's compliance, and that these are in the interest of all companies to observe and follow. Significantly, in 2011, the first version of these guidelines, I was a member of the drafting committee of these guidelines, contained an entire principle on human rights. Now, the Ruggie framework, in a sentence, I've shared this with, so we must never forget, as the minimum duty of the state and business: protect, respect, and remedy. Protect, fulfill, and respect are all the roles of the state, but the minimum duty is to protect you and I and everybody else from negative impact on our rights by business. Companies have a minimum duty of respecting your rights and mine. What does respect mean? Do no harm. Before the conversation of doing good, we must assure ourselves that there is a mechanism not to harm. And if the state fail, companies fail as well, then let us create for ourselves as robust as possible a system of remedy, judicial or non-judicial, where we can go to correct the imbalance of power. So in 2011, I was able to, after a lot of help from all the friends with which we worked together, to insert a new principle called the business responsibility to respect and promote human rights. In 2018, we were asked to update these guidelines because so much had happened since 2011 in human rights in business, and we did so. Now, if you look at the document I've circulated, that's just a visual copy, you will note some really path-breaking things that we are working on. The full fruits and benefits will happen a few years hence and in times to come in a permanent way. How do I mean? If you are a researcher, for example, one of the most difficult tasks is to obtain the sort of information we want about business impacts on human rights. If you want to enter into the agenda of business responsibility, and the right to information is not available to the private sector directly. You have to ask the state, and the state asks the private sector, and we know the quality of information that emerges from such a process. We also know the difficulty of changing the mandate of the RTI to focus on the private sector. We also know the similar difficulty of getting a mandate of the NHRC, National Human Rights Commission, to not only have the state in its purview, but in certain contexts, business as well. So therefore, the choice, the faster choice that was available to us with different ramifications was to embark on a mission to obtain this information. Can you imagine? We have access to financial information that is audited, observed by everybody, read, balance sheet on a quarterly basis, but we have no information on environmental impacts, no information on impacts on workers, no information on impacts on human rights. In that discourse, just balance sheet. We are living in an age where more apparent than ever is that the social environmental performance of business will dictate whether it is in business, never mind whether it's profitable. And yet we don't have information in the same report. Investors find this impossible, as do you and I. How do we get this information? In 2012, something historic was done in this field. At least SEBI, the powerful regulator of our listed companies, made it mandatory initially for 100, then 500, now even beyond that, to release information based on the guidelines that I mentioned have been drafted by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the NGRBC's National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct. So what did we do? We developed a reporting framework, and we persuaded, or SEBI persuaded itself, that all listed companies must file a BRR report, Business Responsibility Report, every year. And I'm part of groups like Henry with Corporate Responsibility Watch, Praxis, so many other friends, who analyze the information provided to us every year. So we have 5 years of analysis. And last year, we developed a new reporting framework based on these analysis. And as we speak, the new version of reporting is being submitted by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, by the Secretary, to the Minister for approval. This would mean that we will have a brand new set of reporting guidelines, including on human rights by companies, that will be mandated not only, we hope, for listed companies, but all companies above a certain threshold. One version for small, medium enterprise, another version for large companies. If, therefore, reporting on social, environmental, and human rights issues is increasingly mandatory nationally and internationally, then how voluntary are these guidelines? So this batch of guidelines does not have the V word, voluntary word, it's simply national guidelines, and we are at the cusp of being able to announce that reporting on these guidelines by companies will be mandatory. Now, this means reporting to whom? Reporting to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in a format that is specified, and a report that you and I can access in the public domain. This is terrific. So this is one of the major efforts, the right to information about business impacts that we are engaged with. And I hope in the coming days you will have more information on this. Returning briefly to the key content of what we have asked companies to do in these guidelines. I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes on this and then conclude. Because for the next 5 years, at least, the duration of these guidelines, the duration of the National Action Plan for Human Rights in Business will be 5 years. So I think if we have the SDGs available to us till 2030, we have then a period from 2020 now to 2025 to review the performance and the implementation of all that we're talking about, and a second phase from 2025 to 2030. So from the point of view of engaging with these agendas, I think we will have the necessary resources to induct more people into this field, more organizations with it on the agenda, more researchers, more students, more aware people engaging with the corporate responsibility agenda. Whenever I have said business and human rights, I also mean actually a longer phrase. People tend to think sometimes that business and human rights is a new topic, something new that companies have to do. This is not true. It is not something new companies have to do. It's a new way of doing things that they already do. And this means that they have to slowly, over a period of time, understand and progress along what we will call a human rights-based approach, an HRBA, a human rights-based approach. Now, I'll return to this because we have asked companies to do 5 primary things and start reporting by next year. So we have about a year once these prescriptions are finalized to proceed. What are these? In the first instance, we expect the board of a company, not the management, the board of a company and the governance structure to develop the strategic human rights guidance and policy that all companies must have. It's not enough to say human rights are alluded to somewhere. We want, as far as possible, an explicit policy which spells out to its employees and other stakeholders that this company commits to the content of international human rights, the Constitution of India, and the national guidelines. And we're taking steps from the government to send such letters to the CEO and boards of every company and ask for a commitment in return. The second is the processes in their companies that manage their human rights impact, both in their direct operations and significantly in their supply chains. In today's world, it would be absurd if the supply chain was not brought into the conversation. Everything is outsourced that can be. Most of this outsourcing is in the informal sector, where protections available to vulnerable people, children, migrant workers, young women, and so forth, are denied or hard to come by. Companies cannot simply say that it's a different legal entity in my supply chain. I have no control over them. What happens there, I don't know, and I can't do anything about it. This is untrue. Neither is it true to say that a company is able to begin right at the end of the supply chain of the homework and then work to tier 1. I think this logical sequence will be from tier 1 to 3 and as deep as it can go where the human rights issues are. And to do this, companies have been asked to do a human rights due diligence. A big topic. We could have a whole workshop on what is an HRDD, due diligence, but the fact of the matter is that it's a framework and a tool to identify, mitigate negative human rights impacts, where these are caused by the company, upon whichever group, especially where these are systemic and where these are the most severe on vulnerable groups that have been outlined. Thirdly, we ask companies to develop a stakeholder or rights holder engagement system and to narrate details of this engagement in their BRR reports that I mentioned to you. Fourthly, we ask companies to develop a grievance mechanism. Companies do have mechanisms, some of them, but do they cover human rights? Usually no. They cover other issues under other labels, and the capacity to be able to raise an issue that is of abiding interest not only to me as human rights, has every chance of being common to another member of the community, employee, because they tend to be systemic. But we need capacities. Now, whether these grievance mechanisms, in-house ones, have credibility or not when they are constructed depends on how well they're constructed and whether they engage with people from outside or not. So this is a requirement as well, to develop in-house mechanisms and to not to stand in the way through legal mechanisms of stakeholders trying to access international or national or state level justice mechanisms. The last I've already touched upon, and this is the issue of reporting and giving account. a company at the end of the year must give an account, not in its own format, otherwise comparability of data would be impossible. So we have specified formats, and we hope that these formats will increase in effectiveness, in the amount of detail, bearing in mind that for small, medium enterprise, we as much as we would like to, remember that there are 9 principles in the national guidelines. They cover labor issues, they cover environmental issues, consumer issues, human rights issues, corporate governance issues, and so forth. And if you wanted to ask 50 questions per principle, that would be 450 questions. And we're also aware that there is a lot of duplicity of reporting. International agencies, domestic, global supply chain partners are asking Indian companies for information. Regulators are doing the same. So we think that there is a scope that this umbrella BRR and the sort of questions that you will be seeing in the public domain are very thorough, and that companies will have to spend a good amount of time collating that data and placing it for us in the public domain. If this information is inaccurate, if this information is incomplete, there must be mechanisms which correct that, either by penalizing such companies or by asking them to take back the report and raise it. So I think that disclosure, it's worth a debate, a separate discussion, a separate workshop, in fact, on how corporate disclosure on human rights issues is changing the game. We attempt not just one tool, a multifaceted approach to bringing corporate responsibility issues to the table. And to give you, without underplaying the issue at all or diluting anything, the level of ignorance in business about what human rights are is alarming. I have been at N number of workshops, let alone the ones with sophisticated companies, leave alone the ones where these are Indian MNCs who've worked abroad for 20 years. They are massive, gigantic corporations, leaving them aside for a moment. When I sit with, let us say, the garment sector in Coimbatore, in Tirupur, in the south, and when we're having debates with the Germans and other buyers sitting there, and we're discussing, for example, child labor. Everybody knows what child labor means. There are doubts about the age, amazingly. But none of these business managers who are parents, incidentally, can name 5 rights of a child. They manage to name right to education. They manage to somehow guess sort of right to identity, expression, and that's it. Now, if a business only does not work in its supply chain and doesn't understand why or which are the other rights that are compromised, then you get this situation with some business managers telling us that it's good that these children work, and other myths. So whether it be at home and that child's right of expression, of privacy, of identity, association, etc., are not respected in school by their teachers, are repeated in higher education, are repeated in the corporate sector, you start getting a body of people that respond, unfortunately, to philanthropy. When I was outside the gates over here in Manesar, helping NGO efforts, just giving basic water facilities, feeding migrant workers in this current scenario, there was N number of goodwill and necessary emergency relief. But the systemic issues are the rights of migrant workers. Now, till last year, despite this conversation about migrant workers happening at many fora where we have raised it as a national issue, in terms, give you an example, not just the Migrant Workers Act, but the whole process of recruiting a young girl, let's say from a village in Jharkhand, to her factory in Ranchi or in Delhi, or a young woman worker from a risk in a garment factory in the south of India, from recruitment to transportation to actual conditions of employment, to either living in a hostel or going home, to host barriers, and now to this situation. It was not for want of telling business that migrant worker was a core aspect of his business if it did not have secure labor it would be out of business. And for those businesses who are attempting now or to further vitiate the atmosphere by forcing longer hours or more oppressive situations on such migrants, this is ghastly. It should be exposed and such employers put behind bars and dealt with very firmly. So I think that in conclusion, because it's 9:32, the real hope is that despite the health impact, the obvious health impact of COVID-19, it is impacting your human rights and mine as nothing else has. I lived through the emergency in the 70s. I was put in police stations and all the rest of it as part of our protest, and I lost perhaps a year or two of my academic career fighting that type of dictatorial emergency that was thrust upon us. This one is even scarier because there seems to be voluntary consensus that lockdowns and affecting livelihoods and other, we can trade off for one issue. I hope that as a result of this ongoing saga, that all of us, all of you, your families, your loved ones, your friends, first of all, stay safe. But at the same time, raise your voices when your genuine enjoyment of human rights without harming somebody else's are compromised. Business, you will hear, supply chains have been destroyed. Some businesses may not recover. Insolvency and bankruptcy issues are there. We know all this. But I will still claim and end on this claim that this is specifically the right time to discuss human rights with business. Not just SOPs, not just bailouts. This is the time for a reinvention of how we look at the society we produce goods and services for. And it becomes the prelude to an age where the human being takes primacy over profits, machinery, and so forth. The concluding remark would then be that I am constantly reminded that I am a consumer of goods and services of the private sector, and this places upon me a great responsibility to manage my choices, my lifestyles, based on the beliefs of my professional work, consistently, credibly, as I can. So with these words, as you know from the opening remarks that Henry made, I made an informed decision a long time back to work in the private sector, in the Tata Group, to understand how it works. I even did training in business management apart from my own social anthropology. And then, obviously, for the last 20 years, I've been back outside working through the advocacy of civil society, but having received an in-depth understanding of the actual functioning of companies and different business sectors, which was vital to my education about the issues at hand. So, in conclusion, I think that the world globally, legally binding treaties on human rights are underway for multinational corporations. National action plans are being developed by a number of countries, including ours. And we can't expect that these are just magic wands or panacea, and with the passage of these legislations and tools, everything will be okay. But I can assure you that what will be better is that the imbalance in the dialogue between civil society, stakeholder groups, and business when you are in a room together, the imbalance of power is being corrected by human rights, because that is a common language. And our discussions when we talk to companies are not in welfarist mode. What do you do for the welfare of women? How would you help children? No, we are talking about the rights of women, the rights of children, and companies better, in their own interests, get used to speaking to us and having dialogues based on an admission and an acceptance of their duties to address, understand, and address human rights impacts where they're caused by them. And that accountability system that I've mentioned will only keep growing. So India, as one of the largest economies in the world today, and certainly in the developing world, I think has a huge opportunity in terms of the business aspect, given all our skills, if it reverses track and stops going to the bottom of the pyramid and competing on those terms. But without going into sloganeering, we've all heard Make in India. I would say and conclude make in India responsibly, both domestically. That message is both to the international investor and the community, that if you come to India, do not expect it to be a place where you can easily exploit and profit. Expect it to be a long-term place where you can do business for the benefit of your own company, but first for the benefit of the consumers, the workers, and the communities in whose midst you do this business. So I think it's up to all of us to join this dialogue, educate ourselves, and as I mentioned, I'd be very, very happy in the days ahead to re-engage with you on specific themes beyond what I was briefly able in these 35 minutes to introduce this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Viraf. Thank you. Without any interference at this stage, over to Matthew for the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Viraf.
Welcome.
Just a few questions. There are almost 10 questions which have come. I'll try to ask the most relevant ones here. A participant is asking the difference between corporate social responsibility and business and human rights.
All right, let me just tackle that first, because I think that's, look, let me answer this way. The labels mean different things to different people all over the world. CSR, corporate social responsibility, corporate social and environmental responsibility, just corporate responsibility, business responsibility, corporate citizenship, responsible business conduct. They're all inventions by different interests. From a civil society point of view, frankly, I could not care less what the label was, whether you call it CR or CSR or BR or DR, does not matter. What matters is the relationship between human rights and business, and you can call it what you like. So in India, wrongly, CSR was treated, what they call CSR here, as a European or global concept, means what? Corporate community initiatives, which is exactly what it should have been called. CSR was always meant to mean a holistic concept that includes social, environmental, and governance. But because there's no global acceptance, nor any platform globally that can say, let's have one common understanding of CSR in China and the US and in India and Uganda. No, there is no such body to forge a common understanding or an acceptance of a terminology like CSR. So therefore, when I speak in terms of what companies are supposed to do, I say it is the responsibility of business to respect human rights. So the word responsibility is there. I don't limit it to corporate social responsibility, because this agenda is not just for corporates, it's for any business, large and small. And then I say, for what? For human rights. So I define my responsibilities, and I usually try to avoid debates into the semantics of different interpretations and different meanings, because as you know, they vary from company to company, and they vary from, so therefore our national guidelines, read them. They don't talk about CSR, they just say these are your responsibilities and proceeds to list them out. Now what you want to call that bunch of things, the government of India have called them responsible business conduct. What does it mean? That you follow these 9 principles, then you are responsible. But responsible is an adjective. So you see, I don't want to claim who is responsible and who is not. On what basis would I do that? I could develop an index. So I think that my phraseology as well, a responsible company, in my context, is one that respects human rights. And human rights, to respect it, means that a company demonstrates that it does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Viraf. The next question is a link between what the participants heard yesterday evening with regard to surveillance privacy and when they heard it today with regard to investors and owners talking about child rights, labor issues, etc. So a participant asked with regard to yesterday's session, with regard to right to privacy. Now, how is right to privacy under the purview of the entire BHR, the corporate responsibility, etc.?
Oh, most urgently and immediately. Most urgently and immediately. And it's not just about online data, it is gigantic in its scale. First of all, we have a right to privacy, and the battle in India, as you well know, which took place through the Aadhaar, issue led to certain judgments about our privacy. Once again, there is a discussion on privacy in terms of the state through the new app, Arogya Setu, etc., etc. But from business, in the first issue, when I was working in companies, there was no Whistleblowers Act. And we had to point out a number of things that were reported to us by stakeholders. And they were the sort of issues, let's take, without going into names and places, exposing a corruption internally. When you do these sort of actions, when you expose them, you are told at one level, like in government, you are bound by secrecy, you are bound by a contract to the company that you can't reveal certain data even after you leave, and these have to be contested. Most people just sign a contract letter. And this can invite companies, preventing you from taking information outside the company when you have found, in a case like corruption, for example, the company or environment, the company hasn't acted. Understand very clearly that exposing these sort of, or fighting these sort of privacy things are very difficult and are very dangerous too. We are threatened frequently, we face consequences. The privacy, therefore, the first level cannot stifle our voices. We should be able to speak to the media, we should be able to speak to authorities without fear of redressal. But I'm afraid that the reality in the business world is that people are afraid to speak their mind in meetings, speak their mind in front of their superiors, speak their mind to anybody. And people, there is a conspiracy of silence because there is a retribution against information that some people believe should be kept secret or private. Now, in the age of RTI, to come to the privacy question, all of us who were engaged in fighting for the right to information, one way or the other, my battle was not fought on the RTI per se, but on the right to information from the private sector, which was beyond the purview of RTI activists at that time. And we are successful, as we've told you. Now, to struggle to get that information means that the right to information is exactly the countering of the right to a company or an authority claiming privacy or protection from sharing such data. We understand that commercial data is private, but non-commercial, social, environmental detail, how should it be? Why should it be? If there is children in my supply chain, if I do not employ differently able people, if the percentage of women in my organization is 5%, and I consider all these answers to be embarrassing for the company, well, tough luck, then change, give us the information. So that can't be private, number one. Secondly, your and my privacy. Whether this is through specific industries, and I want to come to the point that whilst there are generic treatments that we have talked about this morning, business and human rights, these are maturing into sector-specific issues. So obviously in the internet and ICT field, our data, private data, what happens to it, all of you are reading about the big battle with big entities, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and the Twitters and the Zooms, and what you are seeing it play out every day. What is appropriate content? What is private? What is not private? Who has access to it? Under what conditions? Medical data. When I was working in the early 90s on developing the first HIV/AIDS policy for Tata Steel in the country, before NACO, it'd be a separate case study to share with you. There was no support from the trade unions, the workers, or the management to do what we did, because nobody believed that the virus was there and they should be taken seriously. And when it was, ladies and gentlemen, the biggest concern I had was privacy, because suddenly doctors were saying, I have 4 cases, just like you're hearing today. Who has coronavirus? Are they being stigmatized? Same with HIV/AIDS. So at that point with HIV/AIDS, I operated a blood bank to get data that I forced confidentiality on. And there were debates on should it be shared with the employer for safety of others? Should it be shared with the family members of somebody with the virus at that time, etc.? These are hard questions. There were no protocol, and we had to develop these, and we have them today. But privacy of records to do with our health, privacy of our financial records, privacy of our movements today are frequently surrendered just by joining a social platform. There's a discussion on whether the right to internet should be a new human right. And if that happens, then many rights, I think, will be protected. And those who violate them will have to pay a penalty to the person whose rights are violated or to an authority to whom it is accountable. And you're seeing this happen today as never before. People are asking. And this sort of privacy. Another level is what we are seeing play out right now, which is data. So if companies have data, for example, on their supply chains, there's no legislation in India that forces any company to give you data on its suppliers. Can you believe this? Now, to give you an example to counter this, the UK, which was the first country to have a NAP, National Action Plan Business Human Rights, developed it in 2013 and very quickly after introduced the Modern Slavery Act. The MSA, Modern Slavery Act of the UK government, behoves Indian entities or any other entities who do business with the UK government to give a modern slavery statement, i.e. there is no bonded labor, child labor, forced labor, traffic labor in its supply chains. What is this? So we are already giving data about our suppliers to a foreign government, but not domestically to our own people here. Business moves that fast, and in the global supply chain, these are the things that happen. So I think at various levels, privacy is a human right, and the boundaries of privacy are frequently exceeded by companies where data that should be private should not be collected at all, is collected, should be kept safely, but is not, and so forth. Your data is sold, for example, on social platforms for commercial purposes. The point is to be smart, to give consent after knowing, and to question these things. You're not alone, and these can be done as class action activities because it's not just you and me, it's thousands upon us, hundreds of thousands of us. So privacy is a big issue. Of course, companies have a right to their privacy in terms of their ingredients, their R&D, their things, their patents, and so forth. But there is also the notion, as you're well aware, of intellectual property rights being stolen from communities, whether it is a right to plants, whether it is a right to the genomes, and other things that large pharmaceutical companies, cosmetic companies sometimes take from forests, etc., without paying these royalties to the communities who've had the traditional rights for a long time. The NGRBC alludes to this specifically. So these are some of the parameters. Thank you.
Thank you, Viraf. Henry, if you want to come in now. Henry, you have to unmute.
No. Okay. I think we leave this session, dear friends, with the 3 words. It is the duty of business to protect. It is the duty of business to respect. And it is the duty of business to find the remedy for all issues that people in business, others who are affected by business face. We had so far looked at business differently, and this session is opening our eyes, and I'm sure the questions were with a little pungent thing, not knowing what the answer was going to be. Don't forget, Viraf belongs to civil society, and he works with business, respecting business, but from a very strong civil society point of view. The question on privacy, therefore, was very, very targeted at you, but they must have got shocked when they got the reply. This is our ally. This is our ally who is there in the forefront with business. And that is why he said, you call it corporate social responsibility, you call it corporate responsibility, you call it whatever you want. I'm not bothered. I'm bothered about human rights being respected. Friends, we will be sending material. Viraf did not want materials to be shared earlier. So we are going to share materials with you, and I'm sure it will be very useful. I just thought it is important for many of the professors here to also consider in their respective departments, like commerce, like law, like social sciences, economics, social work, and human rights, etc., whether you could introduce a new module on business and human rights. And if you want to do it, then we have introduced you the expert whom you should bring to assist your college or your university or your department or faculty or whatever it is. And I'm saying it seriously because this is something which I am a student of. I keep learning more and more. And I'm sure when students are exposed to it, things will develop faster. And don't forget, he spoke about the imbalance of power. That is important. We are setting right the imbalance of power that this corporate world is bringing in. And he speaks to them with the rights of women, rights of children, rights of Dalits, rights of the Adivasis, the right to food, right to housing, right to health is what he is pushing through. Friends, I thought it might be good for you all to also, I mean, this is going to be something that I will share with you later, but for you all to know, and you can just take it down because you can Google afterwards. This is the Business and Human Rights Resource with which Viraf is also very closely associated. Are you able to see this? Matthew, visible?
No, I've stopped your screen sharing. Your connectivity is a little bad. We can share it with the participants later.
What is bad?
Your internet is very bad.
My internet is bad. Now you see it to be okay.
Just to say, the Business Human Rights Resource Center is a one-stop shop, and it's very well designed. It's updated hourly, and you can click a company, a country, a human rights issue. So it was one of the things, a group of us, I'm a member of the advisory group for South Asia for this. So please do use the resource there. It is in front of you. And it's actually helps researchers enormously because you have to click on India, click on Tata, click on child rights, and you will get a very fair contemporary narrative all at one place. It's updated hourly. And please, the other experience, please put you can also post your own blogs. You can also post your own stories. So engage with the website. It's a public good. It's a common good. So it's your website. And I'd urge you to, at this point in time, we are trying, many agencies, of putting some COVIDs and human rights and business stories from India up there. So I hope that you'll be able to see these. I think there are already a number of them. So please do try it out. And I think you can see from the range of topics, many of them I've mentioned today already, but some I haven't. They're very well constructed. So please do engage with this resource. Henry, thank you very much for putting it up.
Rajavel, just go up. Go up, Rajavel. Let everybody see this. Go up. Yes. Go to find companies. Friends, today is the 22nd of May. The killing that took place to safeguard Vedanta. Just look for Vedanta here. Down. Down, much down. I have that in my, that's why I can't do it. Vedanta resources, yes. Go to more information. There you see, you name the company, you will be able to get details of the company. So friends, this is a whole new world. This 45 minutes is to introduce you. And what Viraf has offered is a special lecture on business and human rights that he's willing to do with those of you who are interested. We will come to those kind of things in the next session. So having said all this, this is an introduction to a new branch, and I'm sure many of you, particularly in the academic world, would also get interested because This is something that you can introduce as a subject, which so far has not been done in many universities for our students in the north and south and east and west of India to benefit from. Thank you very much, Viraf. We will close this session formally. Thank you very much for being here with us, and we will get back to you with the balance questions for your answers on WhatsApp voice.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My dear friends, we have before us a few urgent tasks to be done. But before that, one or two explanations to be given. I have never had the luxury to communicate with you all calmly. I was in the last 1 minute or the first 2 minutes and had always to be like this Rajdhani Express. And now I'm gifted with this time at my disposal. Friends, I know there are many of you who are concerned that you were not able to ask your questions yourselves. The reason is we had to follow some internal discipline. You all know I did not know. I was finding it difficult, and yesterday when Usha was talking about numbers, I thought some of you will say, you also have numbers here. The reason was there is a lot of negative things that happen in Zoom classes elsewhere. And there are some good friends who advised us not to allow people with names, because there can be a lot of connected matters later, which would be detrimental to us, but also inside the class. And for those who want this to be explained, I will explain it. There are Zoom classes, Zoom sessions somewhere where people have crept in and then shown pornography. We are all adults here, so you understand what I'm saying. And so it is therefore that our gates had to be very closely guarded, and we wanted to guard it therefore with this registration number which others could not come up with. So this is the logic behind why your names are not there, number one. I'm sure there are genuine questions. These questions were with me, so I'm sure it can be on your side, and there is a duty on our part to explain this. The second question was, why don't you allow us to introduce myself as Professor Regina from Teachers College. I'm the principal of Teachers College, so-and-so Teachers College in Chennai. I want to ask this question myself. Why did you not allow us to do that? I want to apologize to all of you for not doing that. I had never had the opportunity to directly respond, although I tried it through my facilitators. I don't know how effective they were in communicating this to you. And therefore, even if they had communicated, I have a duty to communicate it again. If we allow questions, we cannot control the time. You know how we have managed time. We have brought the best speakers in the country on subjects and had to curtail them within 30 minutes. And the reason for curtailing them was to ensure that there were 10 minutes for questions. And generally we managed. We might have gone 1 minute, 2 minutes this side, always started on time, and almost always finished on time. Therefore, if we had allowed people to ask questions, here we had the privilege of my colleague, and my colleagues are, you would have seen, have been able to put several questions together, pool questions together, so that the question is made in a way that it represents 2 or 3 which they received, or more than 2 or 3 which they received. And you all know, you are teachers, some of you are students. And you all know, when somebody is given a chance to ask a question, very often in a hall, they don't only ask questions, but they want to do a small little talk of 1 minute extra or 2 minute extras. And if there were 5 people who did it, we will never be able to finish in 45 minutes. So having this large number of people, that was a restriction that we are there. We understand, but I hope you will understand why it was done. I don't think I'm justifying it. I'm only giving our reason. You should know what our reason was. You may not accept our reason, but that was the only reason. And we think in every session we did at least 5 questions, and we are keeping our word. All these questions are going to the resource persons, and their answers will once again come to you. The questions will go to them, and the answers will come back to you. Now, why I said this is now, in this session we were supposed to talk about evaluation. I wanted to listen to evaluation face to face, but it's going to be very difficult. Just imagine if Matthew was saying, unmute all, what we will have in front of us. So that is the reason why we are not doing it, but I want to assure you that I will randomly select some numbers. I won't look at names. I will take numbers. So I don't know numbers at all. And I will make it a point that some of us in the core group talk to some of you to get your personal feedback, and it will be randomly selected. In addition to that, we are planning an evaluation of Module 1, an evaluation of Module 2, and an evaluation of Module 3 and 4 together. Your evaluation will be online, and your evaluation will be a longer question, which you can do at home. And then, just as you did it on Google, you can send it back to us also on Google. We will ask for your number, not to match your name and find out who you are, but to make sure we have got all the registered candidates formally responding in the Google. Confidentiality will be maintained. Trust me, I'm your own brother telling you that. So the questionnaire. In addition to the questionnaire, will be core group members having access to you. Of course, we won't intrude into your privacy. Be sure I will not call you at 10 o'clock in the night or at 1:30 in the afternoon when you're cooking food, or at 12 o'clock or at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday when you're all in church or engage in some religious prayer services, etc. No, we'll send a message to you, get your approval, and then have a very short conversation with you. So this is to ensure that the feedback is given. I mean, we have never had such sessions, and therefore this feedback from you is very useful. We have really strained ourselves to get the people we have got and the people we are still to get. But we are thankful to all of them. You got quality number 1 of India here. Quality 1. Viraf, whom you had today, is number 1. You cannot have anybody on the side of business or on the side of civil society. And as I told you, most of them are in various committees, although they are very critical of the government. And that is why the CVs, it was difficult to get the CVs out from them. They don't like sharing CVs. But we got it because we wanted to introduce them to you. As I told you now, for colleges, academicians, my Open University colleague is here. Ask him whether he has a program on business and human rights in his university. He might tell me, for the sake of record, yes, but if I check, I'll find there's nothing. Therefore, it is important that you all are introduced to new people, so that these courses that you all undertake can bring in this element of business, because business has to be challenged. Yesterday, I was in tears when I responded to Usha Ramanathan, when I told her, I feel ashamed. I'm not talking about others. I feel ashamed that I did not communicate the way I should have communicated with migrant labor when they were here and when they were working. I've spoken about them. I've intervened with them. I've spoken on their behalf these days, but feel guilty for what I did not do in the past. Therefore, this subject becomes very, very important to all of us. So on evaluation, a questionnaire online for all of you, and you just need to fill it up, and the numbers for whom we have not got alone, facilitators will privately tell you, not in the group, will privately tell you. Second, some of us will speak to you, and we will also get one or two facilitators to do a random. So there will also be some random cross. I'm asking the permission of the facilitators for a short meeting with them. I think the letter might have gone or is in the process of going. And at that time, I will ask them, those who want to volunteer, to also join this team. Friends, now it has not been easy taking decisions. I have had colleagues with me who have fought and won to say Sunday morning we should not have classes. That is why Sunday mornings you don't have classes. However, while looking at the deadline, they have also impressed upon me very strongly that we should not go beyond 31st of May. Not because they had an agenda, because they wanted to respect each of your agendas. Although if given 5 days more, which means about another 8 hours of classroom more, just 8 hours, we could have done much better in module 3 and 4. Therefore, we are keeping to our word, and therefore closing it up, removing sessions to ensure that we don't request you. But later we are open to the fact that if you want special classes on certain subjects, we will definitely open those classes to all of you and do it at a time where it is more convenient for all of you, having discussed with you. That will be voluntary, truly voluntary. I hope it's clear. So therefore, we are closing on the 31st for sure. We are on the 12th day, and this afternoon we start our module 2. As I'm speaking, I would just request Matthew to call Maya. Maya wants to have a chat with me. Tell her I'm in the session, and I'll call her immediately. I want to show you what module 2 is, and it will be immediately shared with you all. But you need to know what the module is. Yes. Friends, the title is Introduction to Institutions Dealing with Access to Justice. The first module was on introducing you to what human rights was. Many people thought we started with UDHR. Many people thought we started with international covenants. People were referring, oh, by now you would have finished UDHR. By now you would have done that. By now you would have done this. No, we started with trying to understand what human rights are. And through our exercises, I try to understand what violations fall within the rights we studied. So that when you see a violation, you will immediately be able to handle that violation in a responsible manner. That was the reason. Rajwell, can you help me push this stuff somewhere where it doesn't disturb the PowerPoint? Rajwell?
What do you want, Henry? He's talking to Maya. Tell me.
No, this business on the side, which is always coming and closing. My face, I don't need to see my face. So, if you can remove that, I don't know whether you can remove it, but if you can.
No, there are 4 small blocks on top of the photographs. Just click the smallest blank over there.
Thank you. This is why we need you, brother. My teachers on technology. So this module is precisely now, how do you access justice when you see human rights violations? Friends, once again, I'm telling you, we are not telling you things for classroom purposes. We are telling you things for your own self. I loved the way Devika spoke to you yesterday and said, I hope this doesn't happen to you. I tell you, it will happen to you, it will happen to me. I recall a protest of the trade unions of college teachers held about 15 years ago in Chennai. Many of the teachers today don't belong to trade unions. But the salaries you are receiving are because trade unions fought on the street. And there was a lecturer, and because they were on strike, they had gone home, some of them. And this professor was from Presidency College. Presidency College. And this Presidency College teacher of physics was from somewhere near Nagapattinam, if I remember. I'm sure Ganesh and others know exactly, but I might be wrong. Somewhere near Nagapattinam. Tanjavur, Nagapattinam. He went to his village, and in his village he was in an ordinary house. I mean, he's coming from an ordinary family. So he was sleeping in the father's small little shop with a mat and some newspaper for his head, and that is where he was sleeping during the strike period. No classes, all of strike. College Teachers Union, Federation of all college teachers of Tamil Nadu, teacher of nuclear physics. Suddenly in the night, he gets somebody knocking at the door. He opens. They give him 2 shots on his neck. I hope you can see it here. And he was pushed into his name was asked, and he was then pushed into a vehicle. And he was taken to the police station. He was taken to the RDO office. Sorry, not police station, the RDO office. Now, the RDO office of that particular place, I think it is Mailadurai, particular place, the Taluk office, the police station, the sub-jail, all are together. College lecturer. And all that he asked was, what? They said, are you lecturer? He said, yes. Come in. The point is that there had been some complaint made by this gentleman about some illegal activity that was going on in his area to the collector. And from his voice and his accent, they found that it was he, it seems. See our investigation capacities. He was taken, beaten, tied. When he went to pass, he wanted to pass urine in the night, he was taken like a dog. I hope you understand what I'm saying. His private parts were hurt. He had injuries on his head. He was remanded for a day and then taken out on bail. Do you know who the RDO was? The RDO was also a former college teacher of Mannar Nayakar College in Madurai. Today he is an IAS officer. His wife used to be a police officer who's no more. This was what happened to a college lecturer. And the police asked them in Tamil, and I say it in Tamil and then come back to English, Vedigundu tayar padradha kattu kudukuriya? Nuclear physics. His understanding of nuclear physics was bomb. Are you teaching students in your college about how to prepare the bomb? Because he was a teacher of nuclear physics. I'm sure this professor would have never in his life ever thought that this would happen to him for doing only things that were right, never wrong. That is why I'm saying never think that this will not happen to me. It happened to him. He came to us. We took him to court. I think Sudha Ramalingam also fought his case, and then he got a compensation. And the other man, the RDO, became an IAS officer. And I traced these people through generations. So that is why I say, don't think this is for you to teach somebody. This is to teach yourself, protect yourself first, protect your family first, protect your children first. This knowledge is for you. And that is why this module is on access to justice, so that you will be able to access justice. You will be able to lead people how to access justice. This afternoon, we have Maya Darwala, whom you know, who is also the NHRC's special monitor on prisons, who will be speaking to us on access to justice in India through courts, through legal aid and national and state human rights institution, an overall picture. She has done the first justice report in this country. She will be presenting the findings of her report. That will be the opening lecture that we will have. Thereafter, tomorrow morning, afternoon, same session, same timings, we have a senior advocate from the Supreme Court of India, Mr. Sanjay Parikh, who is also the Vice President of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, one of the most premier civil liberties organizations of this country. And for me, I started my human rights with PUCL in Madurai, who will introduce you and me to courts in India, the subordinate courts, the higher judiciary, and how you can work for protection of human rights through the courts. In the afternoon tomorrow, you have introduction to the development of legal aid, free legal aid in the country, which will be done by Geeta Ramasheshan, who is a lawyer from Chennai, but who has been engaged in legal aid and the development of the legal aid movement in this country since 1980. Along with Justice Chandru and many others who later moved on in life. So what is the legal aid? You remember yesterday when Devika's session was going on, I spoke about legal aid, she spoke about legal aid. So we will come to one session on the legal services authorities. On Sunday, morning is yours. Afternoon will be the concept, the origin, mandate and concept of national human rights institutions, which I've introduced as an actor earlier. We will go deeper into it. And then introduce to you what is the NCW, what is the NCM, what is the NCPCR, what is the NCSC, sir? What is this, sir? The National Commission for Women, the National Commission for Minorities, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. The National Commission for Scheduled Castes, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, the Central Information Commission, the National Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities, and the National Commission for Safai Karmacharis. Lots of work in 1.5 hours, but I've been mandated to do that in that time. Monday, introduction to the Protection of Human Rights Act, under which is established the National Human Rights Commission and the State Human Rights Commission. Will be done by Dr. Y.S.R. Murthy, the Professor and Registrar of Jindal Global University in Sonipet, Haryana. He is the Executive Director of their Center for Human Rights Studies and also connected with the Jindal Global Law School. He's also Senior Fellow of the International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building. He worked in the National Human Rights Commission, believe it. He was the personal secretary to Justice Venkatacharya, if I remember correct. The only one who can correct me in this audience is Anil Parashar, if he is there. He will introduce us to the NHRC, and after that, he will be followed by Mr. Parashar, whom you all know, who celebrated his birthday. The age is still a secret, but that's always good. Who will speak to us on the complaints handling mechanism of the NHRC. The NHRC has to go to Mr. Sanjay Parikh of the Supreme Court. The complaints to the NHRC have to be sent by you and me. Forget me, you, each one of you. So that is what he will be pitching in. What is the complaints handling process? What happens to a complaint that goes on? How can you send complaints by online, etc., etc., etc. And in the afternoon will be what are the best practices in national and state human rights institutions. We get one of the best people to talk to you. serving today in these commissions, you will lose inspiration. Therefore, we are not calling them. Very plain. We want to inspire to continue to work. Dr. Shanta, who is a professor, is the former first chairperson of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Speak, and Dr. Vasanthi Devi will speak as one of the former chairpersons of the Tamil Nadu State Commission for Women. Best practices of National Commission. On the 26th, my dear friends, we have Introduction to Global Institutions Associated with National Human Rights Institutions, the regional groupings of national human rights institutions. So we have an NHRC in India, an NHRC in Sri Lanka, an NHRC in Maldives, an NHMR in Korea, in Mongolia. It's coming up in Taiwan. It's established in Taiwan, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in East Timor, in the Philippines, etc. They have a Austrian body. She will explain what that is. What are the other institutions? How do the UN? And this is done by Madam Roslyn Noonan, former chairperson of the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. We don't have our chairman of the NHRC here, but you have the line in Auckland. She's agreed. She'll be here. And in the afternoon, we have attempted to also bring 4 people to talk about best practices in national human rights. So we are. This is to be confirmed. The chairperson of the Philippines Commission, we are trying. The commissioner from Malaysia, officer who works with the Asian Network of National Human Rights NGOs working with national human rights institutions. Shana from Bangkok, and then who coordinates the All India Network of individuals and NGOs working with national and state human rights institutions in India. This is module 2, my dear friends, which finishes on 20. Starting on day 17, Introduction to the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism. We are asking Milun Kothari to do it. He's the best who can do it overall. The entire umbrella will be exposed. And then somebody will do all the treaties in the afternoon, all the international treaties together, and see what you have to, as students, understand from that. On the next day, you will have all the special rapporteurs. What is that? Stuff till today, NHRC has not condemned. Till today, no other official body in the country has condemned. So what are these special rapporteurs? What have they done? Have they come to India? What have they found by coming to India? How can we communicate to them? You can communicate to them from Chandigarh University, from the Faculty of Law, which teaches human rights. You can communicate to them from Trivandrum, from Guwahati in Assam. You can send details of human rights violations. It is to introduce that. You don't need to go anywhere else. You can do it yourself. And then in the afternoon, we will be on sustainable development goals, which is the in thing. Everybody should know what it is. So we'll be introducing sustainable development goals, what they are. We have Oxfam India's director doing the course, that part of it. And on day 19, we get into skills, module 4. Friends, time is limited, so we have. What are the skills we are exposing you to? Fact-finding skills. How do you fact-find on human rights violations? How did you organize a 2,500-page report in a matter of 3 days with 23 jury members going to Thoothukudi? How do you do fact-finding? How do you document, report, and undertake research and drafting of complaints in the human rights world? How these are things doing? So we'll have panels of doers from the country who will speak. How do you use media and commercial and communications for protection of human rights? And last, how do you network? How do you advocate? How do you lobby for human rights? On the last day in the morning, the last session of module 4 is that all this is not only important, what most important is how do you occupy streets? People are getting angry. How do you occupy streets? Because mobilization of people in protests is what to condemn the 2 years of inaction by the state in Tuticorin. And we are getting none other than Medha Patkar, a student of social work, who decided to remain single throughout her life, working for the rights of the marginalized of this country. Symbolic. We are bringing her to talk about the importance of mobilization, which is completely forgotten today. Nobody wants to mobilize. Nobody wants to go to the street. Nobody wants to raise a slogan. Everybody is scared. So, right of mobilization is a skill that is required for attaining human rights. And the last is the Valedictory Address. We are attempting to get Justice Madan Lokur, former judge of the Supreme Court of India, who retired recently, was one of the 4 who addressed to come and speak. One of the best women activists in this country, whom I respect a lot. We'll try to get people like that. That's it, friends, for today. I will not keep you longer. I ask you all to come at 3:45 today. We will try to finish this evening at 5:15. By now, you would have all received your links for the public meeting, the first online public meeting that we are organizing. Connected from Zoom to Facebook. So Facebook Live. And all of you are the special invitees because I'm using the same connection. So all of you will receive invitations as usual for the 4 o'clock meeting And while that 4 o'clock meeting is going on, you will receive another invitation for around 5 o'clock for the 5:45 meeting. It starts exactly at 5:45 and goes on till 10 o'clock. We don't want you to be sitting there and listening till 10 o'clock. Keep your Facebook live and go in whenever you want. Follow whichever speaker you want. You have all to log in. My good friend from Orissa said, sir, will there be translation? I told him, if you call me in the night at 11 o'clock, I will translate everything to you in English. Obviously, it is in Tamil, and it is showing solidarity to the families of the 16 persons who died. I won't say killed, who died. Some of them were killed, some died due to different things. We're all connected with the event, and over 250 who were injured. Friends who have not got justice for 2 years. So 5:15 we'll close, but 5:45, I would like you to be there at least when the whole thing starts. You have the privilege of having the same Zoom connection, so you will be allowed. Very strict entry today. So if people don't come with their registration numbers, you will not be allowed inside, excepting those who have special invitation status to come. Thank you, friends. I remind you once again, evaluation will come to you on Google in a day. After the evaluation, you will also have people who speak to you, fixing time with you and coming to you. That is a favor you do to us. Thank you for all your cooperation. People wanted to know absentees. We are not bothered about the absentees because we find that there are no regular absentees. There are some people who might have had a marriage at home, might have had something else at home, not well, or some commitment. There have been people who have been courteous enough to inform us in advance of their not being able to come. I think that's important. We respect that. So attendance is really not a very major problem here because continuous absentees are not generally to be found. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. It's 35 and I think it's time to finish.